It is May 1st, 1883. Heinrich Vogelsang, a 22-year-old merchant's assistant, steps into the Bay of Angra Pequena, today known as Lüderitz Bay. On behalf of his employer, Adolf Lüderitz, he makes a deal that will change Germany and West Africa forever. He purchases the entire bay, plus 5 miles of hinterland, from the Nama people for a mere 200 old rifles and 100 British pounds. A truly remarkable deal. But even this seems insufficient. With a clever trick, Vogelsang manages to increase the territory 16-fold. Soon, it grows to an area 1.5 times the size of the entire German Empire. Back home, Vogelsang and Lüderitz are celebrated as national heroes, as this marks the beginning of Germany's most famous colony. Germany has finally found its place in the sun. Although they remain there for only about 30 years, they leave an imprint on Namibia's history that lasts to this day. How did they manage to seize such an enormous territory? What was life like in the colony? And why is Namibia still so strongly influenced by Germany today? We will explore all these fascinating questions in today's video. Enjoy! A few months after the acquisition, Bismarck sent the gunboat Nautilus to Lüderitz Bay to inspect the new German territory. It was noted that the agreed territory was measured in English miles, as this unit of length was also familiar to the Nama people. Here lies the first deception. The contract did not explicitly state English miles, so the Germans simply used the much longer German geographical mile, which is 4 times as long. In this way, the territory quickly expanded. Equipped with more pounds and rifles for bartering, Heinrich Vogelsang pushed further inland. For 500 pounds and 60 rifles, he purchased the entire region up to the Orange River. Time and again, the locals were deceived, but they had little to counter the determined Germans. The same applied to other colonial powers, some of which also had claims to Namibia, but were too preoccupied with their own colonies. Germany's strategy was to expand as much as possible initially and resolve ownership details through treaties later. This was ultimately achieved at the Berlin Conference of 1884 and 85. All the major colonial powers were present, but no representatives from Africa. One of the central resolutions was the principle of effective occupation, which stipulated that a colonial power had to exercise actual control over a territory to claim it. Thus, the area became a protectorate of the German Empire, called German Southwest Africa. The northern border with Angola was negotiated with the Portuguese, and the border with the Cape Colony was established with the British. In 1890, the Heligoland-Zanzibar Treaty between Germany and Britain also came into effect. Germany ceded Zanzibar, now part of Tanzania, and received in return the island of Heligoland and the Caprivi Strip. This is why Namibia's current borders have such an unusual shape, though I have already made a separate video on this topic. German Southwest Africa now reached its maximum size, and the Germans began establishing a colonial administration. The foundation for this was the Fort Gross Windhoek, which became today's capital of Namibia, Windhoek. Various organizations were established, such as the German Colonial Association and the German Colonial Society, which supported the settlement of Germans in Southwest Africa through financial aid. As a result, the number of emigrants steadily increased. By 1903, approximately 2,000 Germans lived in Southwest Africa. By 1909, around 9,000, and by 1914, approximately 14,800. However, these numbers fell short of expectations. The main problem was the harsh conditions in the arid southwest of Africa. Namibia is primarily a desert, and remains one of the most sparsely populated countries in the world. There was little room for effective agriculture, and most emigrants arrived only in search of quick wealth from gold. The limited resources of the land quickly led to conflicts between the new settlers and the local population. In response, the German Empire established the German Protection Force, a military unit tasked with defending German interests and systematically suppressing any resistance against colonial administration. At its peak, this force numbered about 15,000 soldiers, employing a scorched earth policy. The troops often opted to shoot first and ask questions later. The conflict between the Germans and the two largest indigenous groups, the Nama and the Herero, escalated further and further. In 1940, a full-scale rebellion erupted. Berlin dispatched an expeditionary corps to support the protection force. Brutal battles ensued, and a large portion of the Herero and Nama populations perished in the fighting, or died from disease or forced labor. Between 1940 and 1980 alone, an estimated 70,000 people died during the suppression of the uprisings. Historians refer to this as genocide. However, it was not until 2015 that the German government officially recognized these atrocities as genocide. Negotiations for reparations have been ongoing ever since, including discussions about numerous stolen cultural artifacts that are now housed in museums and research institutions. By 1980, after the brutal conflicts, the colony lay in ruins. Much of the population was dead, farmland destroyed, and the economy nearly collapsed. Yet, in the same year, the first diamonds were discovered. This discovery triggered a gold rush-like frenzy in the colony. Everyone wanted to try their luck in the hopes of quick wealth. The colony benefited enormously from this. By 1914, more than 150 million Reichsmarks worth of diamonds had been extracted, and a tax introduced in 1912 brought additional revenue to the colonial administration. It seemed as though the colony was becoming profitable and capable of standing on its own. But in 1914 came a thunderclap, the outbreak of World War I. The Union of South Africa, as a member of the British Empire, immediately declared war on the German Empire. The Germans were hopelessly outnumbered, both in troops and equipment. Even with reservists, volunteers, and local auxiliaries, the German army numbered only 5,000 men, while facing an army of over 43,000 South African soldiers. The colony was overrun, and on July 9, 1915, the war ended with the capitulation of the Protection Force. Under the Treaty of Versailles, the colony was placed under the administration of the Union of South Africa. German Southwest Africa was history. Nevertheless, even today, more than 100 years later, numerous German traces can still be found. One example is the German language, which continues to play an important role. Until Namibia's independence in 1990, German was an official language alongside Afrikaans and English. Many older people still speak German as their mother tongue, and among the younger generation, some learn it as a foreign language. Several schools in Namibia offer German language instruction. In addition to education, German is also present in Namibian media. There are German-language newspapers and radio stations which serve not only the German-speaking community, but also tourists and German learners as valuable sources of information. Architecturally, German influences can be seen everywhere. A notable example is the Christuskirche, consecrated in the early 20th century, which is now a national monument. German-language church services are still held there. In cities like Lüderitz and Swakopmund, often called the German Jewel, German architecture is abundant. The colorful Jugendstil buildings, which resemble something from a movie set, are particularly famous. German traditions and festivals also remain. The most famous is the annual Oktoberfest in Windhoek, considered one of the largest of its kind outside Germany. Visitors enjoy traditional German food, numerous German beers, and German folk music. Other events, such as carnival, Christmas markets, and St. Martin's Day also hold significant importance in Namibia. Additionally, there are many German restaurants and bars in the country's urban centers. In the middle of the desert, one can enjoy traditional dishes such as bratwurst, sauerkraut, schnitzel, and kassler. German bread, pastries, and cakes are popular throughout the country. Finally, Namibia is home to numerous German breweries. Today, Namibia's diverse ethnic groups coexist largely peacefully. The country is considered one of the most peaceful in Africa, benefiting from a stable democracy, a functioning rule of law, and relatively strong economic development compared to other African nations. Tourism is a major contributor, with Namibia becoming an increasingly popular destination, especially among Germans.